Tie off your straight and extension ladders and make sure they extend 3 feet above the upper landing. And finally, don't take chances on ladders. Chances like climbing with too much material in your hands, or working off the top of a step ladder, or leaning out too far to the side of the ladder. Do it right, do it safely, and let's climb that ladder another day. Now let's shift the discussion to talk about another elevated surface, scaffolding. First,
Scaffolding! Scaffolding,
constructing or tearing down a scaffold, that work must be supervised by a qualified person. Scaffolds need to be strong and steady, so if scaffold warrants is bending or bowing, then it's probably overloaded, maybe unsafe. Scaffolding needs to be level and stable, with poles placed on base plates, mud sills, or adequate firm foundation. All scaffolding sections must be pinned with all braces in place before work is started, and this one's real important. All scaffold work platforms must be fully decked. That means anywhere a worker is standing or doing any work on a scaffold, that area must be fully decked. You can't climb the cross braces. You've got to use some sort of ladder. Many scaffold systems have ladders built in, but if they don't, use a tied-off extension ladder to access your work area. But let's talk about where most scaffolding safety violations and accidents occur, and that's the lack of fall protection. Any scaffold above 10 feet high needs fall protection. Most companies use guardrails and midrails, but remember, all open areas must be protected, even those areas where you load or unload materials. Also, you can't stand on block or brick, or even a step ladder while on a scaffold, nor can you stand on a rolling scaffold unless the wheels are locked. Let's recap the important points. Scaffolds should be set up properly, including base plates, mud sills, pins, cross braces, and all work areas must be fully decked. Scaffolds need proper ladder access. Scaffolding over 10 feet high must have fall protection. This usually means guardrails and midrails. And lastly, don't take chances working on scaffolds. Whether it's climbing the X-braces, ignoring the need for fall protection, or letting your buddy roll you while you're standing on a rolling scaffold. These are shortcuts that can get you hurt, or worse. Do it right, do it safely, and make sure your scaffolds are as safe as the ground below your feet.
Now let's move from scaffolds and talk specifically about fall protection that's used elsewhere on the job site. Fall protection is needed in most cases wherever a worker can fall 6 feet or more. But you've got to make the distinction. We're not talking about aerial lifts, ladders, scaffolding, or steel erection. They all have separate fall protection rules. And there are several different types of fall protection, but 3 are most widely used. And they include guardrails and midrails, usually placed on an outer edge. They have to be strong enough to keep you from falling. Personal fall protection, which includes a harness, lanyard, and a suitable tie-off point. Personal fall protection is needed in areas where other fall protection can't be used. But wearing it doesn't do you any good if you don't tie off. And tie-off points need to be strong. Each tie-off point must be able to hold 5,000 pounds per employee. And 5,000 pounds is the weight of a small truck. And finally, warning lines, used to keep workers a safe distance from fall hazards and should be at least 6 feet away from the hazards. But keep in mind, warning lines are useless if a worker goes outside the line and is not tied off. In reality, fall protection is quite simple. If you're working in an area where you can fall 6 feet or more, like outside these warning lines, you need some type of fall protection. Now let's recap. First, you've got to know when fall protection is necessary. Next, you've got to know what fall protection is best for your job. And lastly, you've got to know how to use fall protection properly, especially in personal fall protection. Know how to wear your full body harness and tie off every time you need to. And I don't want to hear that tired excuse that there's nothing to tie off to. Figure it out before you start work, because falls on construction sites kill more workers than any other type of accident. So do it right, do it safely, and protect yourself from falls every time you need to. Electrical power. It's called the silent killer. On the job site, electrical power is almost always required and all too often misused. Making matters worse, most new workers don't have any appreciation for the kind of injury that an electrical shock can deliver. So let's talk about electrical safety, and I'll focus on how and where you'll come into contact with electrical power on the job site. First, all job site electrical power needs to be grounded and protected with ground fault circuit interrupters, called GFCIs for short. An example would be any temporary panels you use. Panels should have protected covers, and be careful. Openings around the edges might expose you to energized electrical parts, especially dangerous if you're carrying tools and materials. And if you see open spaces in a panel box, stay clear. Panels should have circuits in place or socket covers where a circuit is missing. Now let's talk about how most of us get electrical power on the job site, through extension cords. First, extension cords must be rated heavy-duty and in good condition, and taped or spliced extension cords are not in good condition. They should be replaced. Extension cords also need a ground prong. A cord lacking a ground is one of the most common violations I find. So remember, if the extension cord you're about to use doesn't have a ground prong, don't use it. And cords on the job site need to be located where they won't get damaged. Don't stretch a cord across a site road unless it's protected. Also, be careful stretching cords around corners, through doorways, setting them down in water, and don't make your cord a trip hazard, especially on or near any stairs. Now let's discuss the site electrical room. These rooms should be kept locked, with only electrical workers and supervisory employees allowed in, and the doors should always have warning labels. Most of you have no business being in these rooms, so don't go in. Especially don't use these rooms for storage. It's an invitation for disaster. My last point involves power lines. It's critical you keep at least a 10-foot clearance from any power lines with any tools, equipment, or materials you're using. Let me discuss a power lines accident to give you an example. A contractor was restoring a building and attached were powerful electrical lines. The work was nearly complete. All that was left was to clean the building, and those workers were using an aerial lift. They were safety trained and repeatedly instructed to stay at least 10 feet away from the power lines. One of the workers made a huge mistake. When he raised his spray wand, he touched the power line. He was blessed, however, as the wand handle immediately broke off and hit by 4,800 volts of electricity. He lived. But Townham is one of the lucky ones. Power that strong should have killed him. And he's lucky for a second reason as well, because now I'm quite sure he has an appreciation for electrical power. And that should be your goal, to gain that appreciation, but gain it the easy way, through your training. Otherwise, you might not get a second chance. So let's recap electrical safety. If your extension cord lacks a ground or is damaged, replace it. Make sure all electrical panels and circuits